LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 11th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. I'll be using the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. I have my main topic, as you can see in the video title, is Will Trump be a dictator on day one? And that's a clip you've probably seen in the media, but I'm going to give you a much larger context. I also have continuing coverage of the Israel's war in Gaza, including a clip at the end where Senator Bernie Sanders will explain where progressives are on the issue. And I'll be showing you clips of my two new kittens who they're kind of distracting me. They're like walking around the studio here as I start the program. Oh, one of them just left. I have two new kittens, and I'll be showing you 3 bonus kitten clips at the end, and I'll be telling you their names and what happened with them for the pet fans out there who have had nothing to watch since the Dash and Sandy clips ended last year. And anyway, oh, there goes. Okay, finally, I have the room to myself. So I'll start with my political comedy, which, like I said, is this clip that got all this news coverage of Trump saying he would be a dictator on day one if he's reelected. And what's really comical about it is it comes from this Trump town hall on Sean Hannity, where Sean Hannity was like doing his best to put to bed this whole issue that Democrats used to great effect in the 2022 midterms, that Republicans were against democracy, that they were going to, like if Trump and the MAGA Trump Republicans are elected, they're going to take away your democracy. And so Sean Hannity obviously had this purpose in this town hall to like undercut that argument as much as possible. And it's not just the question he asked Trump. He actually started off the whole program talking about how the deep state had been coming after Trump and all the bogus charges against him. And then Trump's reacting to that, and he's going to go after the deep state. And then a montage of all these people saying Trump was going to be a dictator, therefore. And this is like the setup clip from the beginning of the program before Trump came on for the interview. Over here.
The 45th president is vowing to fight back and obliterate the deep state. Let's take a look.
If you put me back in the White House, their reign is over. Their reign will be over. And they know it. And America will be a free nation once again. We're not a free nation right now. We don't have free press. We don't have free anything. In 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today, I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution. I am your retribution. Not going to let this happen.
Now, that's become a controversy among the left. Wrong, as he said earlier, but we'll play that for him and get a response tonight. Now, that's an important promise. America's weaponized, politicized bureaucracy, it's got to be dismantled. The far left hacks and the media mob, of course, they disagree. And once again, they are predicting doom and gloom if Donald Trump is elected. Here's the Washington Post yesterday, quote, the fear of a looming Trump dictatorship. And this is today's headline from Salon.com. Americans are sleepwalking into a Trump dictatorship. It's now their favorite word. Over at fake news, all cable news channels, they're featuring, the same brand of fear mongering. Obviously, it's clear they don't want to talk about Joe Biden and his failed record. Take a look.
Dictatorship. Is that what we would have if we reelect Donald Trump?
I think it's a very, very real threat and concern.
I think the phrase sleepwalking into a dictatorship should wake people up.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's not going to be the kind of dictatorship with concentration camps and martial law overnight, is it? That's not what we're going to get. We're going to get Trump borrowing from the Orban playbook in Hungary, from the Modi playbook in India. And what does that look like, Jason? What would that look like here in America?
Fears of a dictatorship, the alarming prediction for a second Trump term.
Liz Cheney is right, what she said, that we are sleepwalking into a Donald Trump dictatorship if people don't wake up and remember what Donald Trump was to the 4 years, what he tried to do to our democracy.
Here's the thing. We already know what would happen under a Trump presidency. Why? Because he's already been president. Lower taxes, stronger growth, a secure border, peace in the Middle East, new trade deals, energy independence, and a push to reform our bloated bureaucracy. There was no dictatorship. We did not lose our constitutional rights. We did not go to war. The people who hate Donald Trump, they simply have been and continue to lie to you.
Well, we did lose a big constitutional right, the right to reproductive choice, and that actually will be coming up in at least one of the news stories about this whole Texas abortion case when I get to the news summaries. But we also saw it from the Donald Trump presidency. You know, other things we lost, like the ability to have a peaceful transfer of power, which we've had like every election in our entire history, maybe not during the Civil War, but even during the Civil War, pretty much, there was still a peaceful transfer of power as to who was U.S. president. Just some of the states didn't want to belong anymore. But you saw there that Sean Hannity, he like worked so hard to set up this argument on the left that he thought could be totally debunked. The whole idea that Trump would be a dictator or take away anyone's rights or abuse power. God, no, there's no way that Trump would ever do that. Well, actually, if you want to know the real substance of this and all the details of the coming Trump dictatorship, if Trump gets reelected, I'm going to put a link for the live viewers here in the comments. This is the latest edition, edition of the Atlantic magazine, their January, February 2024 edition, and they have dozens of articles there. Maybe later I'll go through them, or some of them, about how the Trump presidency is, if Trump is reelected, they do some real deep reporting, well-sourced, about all these terrible plans, like Trump, like he was an incompetent dictator last time, but he's going to be more competent this time, I guess, or anyway. But I've shown you the setup from the Sean Hannity Town Hall last Tuesday, and so I also want to show you the way Sean Hannity set up the question. And there's this like meme. I don't know if any of you ever heard of this. The leopards eat your face party. Like it's a metaphor for the Republican Party. Like, we elect the leopards eat your face party, and then we're surprised that leopards eat their faces, or that we end up having leopards eating our faces. I don't know where that came from. I didn't make it up. But this is almost the question here that Sean Hannity is asking Donald Trump is like, so if we elect you as head of the leopards eat our faces party, no leopards are going to eat anyone's faces, are they? You have no plans for any leopards to eat anyone's faces. That's anyway, if you know that whole metaphor, then I think you understand the basis of this question, which I will talk about a little more after you see Sean Hannity's question and Trump's answer, where he's trying so hard to get him to say he won't be a dictator, and he doesn't actually say it in part one of the question over here.
On purpose, because I see what the media is doing now. I put a montage together. They want to call you a dictator. You use the words, I am your retribution. And now before that, you said if you've been wronged, and you used other words as well. But I want to be very, very clear on this. To be clear, do you in any way have any plans whatsoever, if reelected president, to abuse power, to break the law, to use the government to go after people?
You mean like they're using right now? So, in the history of our country, what's happened to us, again, has never happened before. Over nonsense, over nothing, made up charges. I often say Al Capone, he was one of the greatest of all time, if you like criminals. He was a mob boss, the likes of which Scarface, they call him. And he got indicted once. I got indicted 4 times. I wonder what my father and mother would say looking down.
We had a lot of private conversations in the lead up to your announcement and the day that you came down that escalator. And in that lead up, I mean, we had some passionate discussions back and forth. You were telling me that Iraq should give us oil to pay for the war, and American blood should not be shed overseas in these long, protracted wars. We talked a lot about that. And you have been under fire from that day forward. Russia, you talk about it all the time. Now you face as many as 4 criminal trials during an election year. Now, I've said this publicly, and I'll say it here in Iowa. I'm not sure that Donald Trump can get a fair trial in New York, Washington, D.C. I don't think you can get a fair trial in Fulton County, Georgia.
So I kept that playing just to show that Sean Hannity didn't really follow up. You saw his follow-up question there was really sycophantic, and I like the way he said he can't get a fair trial in New York or Washington, D.C. or Fulton County, Georgia. Didn't mention Florida, the documents case down in Florida, which is actually in like fairly Republican county where that judge is, but that probably won't go to trial before the election anyway. But you saw there Sean Hannity, like, not really the best interviewer or even, like, honestly the brightest person based on my watching of his show, which is fairly spotty. I have to say I'm not a regular watcher of Sean Hannity, but when I do watch him, I have not been impressed with his intellectual capacity or his ability to cross-examine people. I watched that Gavin Newsom versus Ron DeSantis debate, and also not impressed. But you see there, Sean Hannity forgot to get Trump to answer the question that he'd spent all that time setting up to get him to say, no, I won't be a dictator. I won't abuse any power. There will be no leopards eating anyone's faces, as I was saying. So yeah, and the one other thing about that, Trump, some of the things he says are like such dead giveaways as to, like, you know, Al Capone, one of the greatest of all time, if you like criminals. Is that like maybe Donald Trump's his goal, his like big dream is to like beat out Al Capone as the greatest criminal of all time? Or I don't know why he is so drawn to criminals and dictators, but that seems to be like the place he wants to be. And anyway, my point about showing Sean Hannity not asking the follow-up question is, if you look really closely when they show Sean Hannity, in his left ear, he has this little earpiece. And I'm sure at some point during the next couple questions, his producer says to him, you know, Sean, we never actually got Donald Trump to answer that softball question you gave him about whether he was going to abuse his power and be a dictator. You should probably like nail that down and get him to deny it so that we can, you know, undermine that whole argument. And also did not go so well, as you can see in the end of that segment on the Sean Hannity Town Hall over here.
Break. I want to go back to this one issue, though, because the media has been focused on this and attacking you. Under no circumstances, you are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
for?
he's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's
drill,
not. That's not.
No, no.
That's not retribution. I'm
going to be. You know, he keeps. We love this guy. He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, "No, no, no. Other than day one, we're closing the border." And we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
So that sounds to me like you're going back to the policies when you were president. All right,
exactly.
Take a break. Just getting started. We're in beautiful Davenport, Iowa.
So, yeah, though he said he would be a dictator on day one, but he came up with these policy reasons which don't even really make sense. Drill, and build the wall or close the border. That's not necessarily the kind of things you associate with dictatorship. But anyway, that is my political comedy in 3 parts. Sean Hannity tried so hard to get Trump to say he wasn't really a dictator, and actually got him to say, I will be a dictator on day one, but only on day one. But who really believes that. But anyway, that was how I wanted to start the program. And now I'm going to show you the news summaries from longest to shortest. They do cover, in some cases, my main topic, but also you'll see a lot of coverage of the Israeli war in Gaza, which I've been covering all the way since the beginning of October. And I'm going to start with the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, which actually is mostly political. It starts off with mentioning there are only 5 weeks to the Iowa caucuses, and talks about issues like abortion, Ukraine, Israel, briefly mentions this Texas abortion case that I was, where this woman who had a fetus with a fatal anomaly could not get an abortion in Texas, and eventually late today had to leave the state. That's kind of a travesty that will make it more difficult for Republicans to be elected. So at least it's a silver lining there. And I'll talk about that a little more maybe after we watch Martha Raddatz do that introduction. And then she's off to Pennsylvania to do this really stupid thing that I criticize every time they do it, where let's pick out like 3 voters and say they represent people in Pennsylvania. Or, well, anyway, I don't like it, and I'll explain a little more why and criticize one of the voters. Although, I don't know, maybe they're representative of a lot of people. You can let me know what you think after we watch that clip together. The longest of the news summaries over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. In a matter of weeks, 5 to be exact, the 2024 election season officially kicks off with the Iowa caucuses, the start of an election that could have profound implications for the future of the country, the issues that shape us as a nation, and democracy itself. As we come on the air this morning, the Texas Supreme Court has put on hold a judge's decision to allow an abortion for a young woman whose fetus has a genetic condition nearly always fatal, and according to doctors is endangering the mother's own health and future fertility. This while Congress debates whether to provide more aid for Ukraine in its fight against Russian occupation, and across the country, protests against Israel's bombardment of Gaza intensify. Abortion, Ukraine, and Israel are all topics that presidential candidates must be prepared to talk about. And to that end, this week, 4 of the remaining Republican candidates were on a debate stage in Alabama, vying to defeat the one who once again failed to show, Donald Trump. The former president still holds a commanding lead in the polls, so is there a realistic path forward for those Republican rivals? We'll talk to ABC's political director, Rick Klein, about that in a moment. But first, we travel to battleground Pennsylvania, key to Joe Biden's victory in 2020 and Donald Trump's in 2016, to see what Republican voters themselves think. It is a state that defines battleground. Pockets of big city blue where Democrats prevail, and deep red stretches where conservatives rule. Here in beautiful York County, Pennsylvania, farm country, Republicans can generally count on a victory. There are 65,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats, and most of them are white. C.J. Weigel, former chair of the York County Young Republicans, has spent his life here in this county of nearly 500,000. At 28, he has voted in only 2 presidential elections, both times for Trump. But this time around, he's looking elsewhere.
And there's a candidate, I think, that possesses a unique perspective and a positive attitude moving forward, and I'm looking to see her do very well.
Her?
Yes.
It's Nikki Haley.
It is, that's correct.
Weigel thinks Nikki Haley is presidential and that it's time for a new party leader. He knows Haley trails far behind Trump in the polls, but says he's optimistic the tide could turn. And if it doesn't, Weigel says he may not back his party. So the possibility is you might not vote, or you would just look for a third-party candidate?
I think I'd probably look for a third-party candidate.
Stephanie Jarback is an independent who leans Republican. She's interested in both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis, even though she can't vote in the closed Republican primary. You voted for Trump in 2016. You voted for Donald Trump in 2020. You're hesitating this time. Why is that?
I'm hesitating because of his age. That's a big one for me. And some of the things that Donald Trump has said over the years here, don't sit well with me. I think he did a good job while he was in there, but I think the time has passed. I think we need new blood in there. I think we need new ideas, new visions.
And if Trump secures the nomination?
If it's Donald Trump and on the other side Joe Biden, and possibly if we have that third party person come in, it's going to be, for me, a very hard choice.
One issue on Jarbeck's mind, abortion.
I agree that every woman has the choice, but I do believe there should be limitations. I don't believe that you should be able to go to 38 weeks and unless something is medically wrong for the mother of the child, and that you should be able to abort that child.
And yet you're interested in Ron DeSantis, so that is not a major issue for you?
That's where, for him, I would say that's a sticking point for me. In any situation, no one should be able to tell you what you believe is right for you.
But despite Jarbeck and Weigel's interest in other candidates, there are many York County residents who remain unabashed supporters of the former president. People like Jamie Wetzel, who aren't bothered by Trump's criminal trials or his dictator rhetoric. Nothing's changed your mind about him?
Nope.
He's got all sorts of charges against him. That doesn't matter. Says the election was stolen. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make a difference to me. I don't necessarily believe them all. I don't believe he's a threat to democracy. I like people who are in an authoritative position to have some authority.
Adam Pastelak would also stand by Trump in a Biden rematch. So if it came to that, it would be Trump for you.
100%. Yeah, anybody but Biden.
And that's what the voters think. But let's go back to our original question. Is there really a path for these candidates trying to defeat Donald Trump? And for that, we turn to ABC News political director Rick Klein with.
And I'm not going to. Sorry about that. Sorry about the feedback. I had put it on the speakers. I hope I didn't break anyone's eardrums there. I put it back on. Sorry about that. But yeah, that was the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, where they went and talked to a bunch of voters in Pennsylvania talking about the Republican primary. There was that one woman there who, I hope she's not representative of a lot of people. What was her comment? Jamie Wetzel, Pennsylvania voter says, I don't necessarily believe them. I don't believe he's a threat to democracy. I like people who are in an authoritative position to have some authority. Was she like dancing around the word authoritarian? I just like authoritarians. I mean, talk about being an authoritarian without being able to say it anyway. But even so, I don't think it was a great look for ABC to spend that much time letting, these women, like, then there was that other woman who said she, was pro-choice, but could still support Ron DeSantis, even though he signed the 6-week abortion ban. But it's kind of a sticking point, and I don't know. I guess we need to have some low information voters on our screens every now and then, because low information voters are a lot more commonplace than people who spend their time looking at the Sunday morning news analysis shows of every Sunday like I do, and my viewers do after I watch them for you, or I know some of you actually watch them yourselves and then participate. But anyway, that was my ears are still ringing from that feedback. I apologize for that, but it won't happen again. And I'm going to show you the next news, or news summary from Fox News, which actually covers the war in Gaza from a very pro-Israel perspective. They have Trey Yingst in Sderot reporting on that this week. And then they have a second news reporter, Lucas Tomlinson, covering this whole congressional hearings on anti-Semitism on campuses. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that abortion case that, that is so bad for Republicans, that Texas abortion case. The woman did eventually travel to another state to have this, her fetus was suffering from this condition called trisomy 18. That means the 18th chromosome pair, instead of it being a pair, there are 3 of them. And it's nearly always fatal, either as a stillborn baby, or if not, then soon after birth. And even if not fatal, just like multiple congenital anomalies with no real quality of life as like the best outcome. There are conditions for like any of the chromosome pairs being tripled instead of doubled, trisomy 21, that's Down syndrome. And from what I understand, those are like the only trisomy conditions where you might even bring a fetus to term. And this one, like I said, is nearly always fatal. So why a woman shouldn't be able to choose to have an abortion in that situation, that is something that Republicans are going to have to explain in the next election, is the point I'm trying to make. And there really is no good explanation unless you think you have one, and you can let me know what it is in the comment section. And now, like I said, I'm going to show you the Fox News Sunday news summary that focuses on the Israel war in Gaza, and then the congressional hearings on anti-Semitism on campus with it's actually Gillian Turner is the guest host this week, Trey Yingst, and Lucas Tomlinson, and I will critique that partisan political propaganda after we watch it together over here.
Hello from Fox News here in Washington. The U.S. is facing major pushback from other nations 2 days after vetoing a UN resolution that called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. That resolution was backed by nearly every Security Council member country. It also came after UN warnings of as Israel expands ground operations further south. Here at home, meanwhile, the nation's splintering over support for Israel, most pointedly across college campuses. University of Pennsylvania President Liz McGill stepped down last night after her responses in a congressional hearing sparked fiery public backlash this week. She had declined to say that students who call for Jewish genocide should be disciplined. Over on Capitol Hill, Senate Republicans stalled the president's supplemental funding bill, which includes hundreds of millions of aid dollars for Israel and Ukraine, demanding instead he secure the U.S. southern border first. In a moment, South Carolina Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace joins us live here in the studio. But we begin first with Fox team coverage. Lucas Tomlinson is standing by at the White House with fallout from the university president's testimony. First, we go to Trey Yingst in Sderot, Israel, with the very latest on the war in Gaza. Hi, Trey.
Gillian, good morning. Israeli forces say they hit 250 different targets overnight as the war enters its 10th week. Behind me, black smoke billows from the Gaza skyline in the Beit Hanun neighborhood, the aftermath of some of those airstrikes. The current operational intensity is expected to last for at least another month, according to officials familiar. After arresting hundreds of Palestinian men in Gaza, authorities here expect to gather new intelligence that could help them to go after Hamas leadership in southern Gaza. The cities of Han Yunis and Rafah will be the focus for ground forces in the coming weeks. The death toll in the Strip continues to rise and now stands at more than 17,000 people, according to the Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry. The war does continue to draw international condemnation, with countries like Jordan and Qatar calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire. This after 13 out of 15 UN Security Council members voted Friday to call for a truce before the resolution was vetoed by the United States. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu responded saying this.
Other countries should also understand that it is impossible on the one hand to support the elimination of Hamas and on the other hand to call for an end to the war that will prevent the elimination of Hamas.
While international focus remains on Gaza, there is continued fire from southern Lebanon, the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah targeting northern Israel earlier today. Gillian.
All right, Trey Yingst reporting from Israel for us this morning. Thank you, Trey. Joining us now is Lucas Tomlinson with White House reaction to congressional testimony on anti-Semitism this week. Hi, Lucas.
Gillian, after a major donor threatened to pull his $100 million donation and 37 members of Congress called for her resignation, the president of the University of Pennsylvania has stepped down.
Liz McGill voluntarily tendered her resignation, according to a letter released by the school's Board of Trustees late Saturday afternoon. Pressure had been mounting on McGill after she testified along with 3 other elite university presidents before a House panel where they were grilled by lawmakers, including Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik.
At Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman. It can be, depending on the context.
The White House responded following the contentious testimony.
Calls for genocide are unacceptable. It's vile, and it's counter to everything this country stands for.
McGill attempted to walk back her comments following her Capitol Hill testimony.
I was not focused on, but I should have been, the irrefutable fact that a call for genocide of Jewish people is a call for some of the most terrible violence human beings can perpetrate.
Days later, she is out of the job. Following McGill's resignation, Congresswoman Stefanik released the following statement. 1 down, 2 to go. This is only the very beginning of addressing the pervasive rot of anti-Semitism that has destroyed the most prestigious higher education institutions in America. This forced resignation of the president of Penn is the bare minimum of what is required.
UPenn says McGill will remain at the university as a tenured faculty member. The chairman of the Board of Trustees, who announced her resignation, also resigned a short time later. Gillian?
All right, Lucas Tomlinson reporting from the White House for us. Thank you. Joining us now here in Washington is South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace.
And I don't have a clip from the Nancy Mace interview, but I think you kind of saw what I pre-criticized about that clip when I showed it there, the partisan propaganda from Fox News. Very pro-Israel from Trey Yingst, as usual. We've gotten used to that week after week. And then Lucas Tomlinson reporting on this whole campus free speech issue and like the outrage on the right that there might be a free speech right to even to call for genocide, which of course is hateful and despicable. And in the university context, especially if it's a private university, so not a state actor, they have more rights than the government to restrict speech on campus. And there are a couple, if it's a true threat where you're directly threatening a specific person that isn't protected by the First Amendment, or if you're creating like a hostile environment, people are paying to go to class, and if they don't feel safe sitting in a classroom they have to be in, that's different than that. You have less free speech rights in that situation than you would like just in a public park speaking on, a soapbox or whatever, where people can just leave if they don't want to listen to you. But outside of those two areas, there actually is probably a free speech right to call for genocide if you're not directing it at a specific person or making people feel unsafe in a location they have to be at or whatever. In fact, I'm a big free speech advocate, and I'm gonna put here a link in the comment section for the live viewers to a Reason Magazine article by Professor Eugene Volokh, who I've had online correspondence with many years ago. He's done some work with the ACLU, but he's a conservative libertarian. He was really instrumental in getting the Second Amendment found to be an individual right by the Supreme Court. In fact, in the Reynolds decision, in which the Supreme Court found it was an individual right, they cited Professor Volok's article about that, and that's one of the things I corresponded with him about. But there's a real, genuine First Amendment issue if you're just like in the abstract saying, I wish there were a genocide on X people, and you're doing it, just somewhere on campus. That isn't necessarily, a lot of these campuses have these speech codes and codes of conduct where speech is restricted more than it would be if we're talking about what the government can restrict under the First Amendment. But anyway, I just wanted to make that point. I see in the live comments one of my regular viewers saying the Second Amendment is obviously an individual right. Well, that isn't true, because the Second Amendment actually has 27 words. And I think I've even had this argument with this regular viewer before. The last 14, if it was just the last 14 words, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. If it just said that, then sure, it would be clear. But what about the first 13 words? The one where it sounds like it's more of a collective right of state militias. Go reread the Second Amendment and reread those first 13 words, and it's not so obvious. That's why Reynolds was a 5-4 decision. But you're getting me off track here, and I want to get back to my news summaries. And the next news summary comes from CBS News Face the Nation, Margaret Brennan, and then Charlie D'Agata in Tel Aviv. And once again this week, CBS does the best job of showing you the brutality of this war in Gaza and the punishment in death and property that it's doing to Palestinians. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We'll get to what Americans are focused on as we wind up 2023 in just a moment. But we want to go first to our Charlie D'Agata reporting from Israel.
The southern city of Khan Yunis in flames from a bombardment Israel says is aimed at hunting down Hamas leaders. And with the U.S. alone in vetoing a UN Security Council ceasefire proposal, anti-American sentiment is higher than ever. These weapons and rockets are made in America, says resident Abu Abed Youssef. They support Israel to kill the youth, children, and women. Even as Israel's military chief tells forces we need to press even harder. The head of the UN's World Food Program warned today half the population in Gaza faces starvation and a severe lack of clean water. Save the Children says deaths from starvation and disease might top those killed in bombings. It's becoming too dangerous for aid agencies to operate, says spokesperson for the UN in Gaza, Juliet Toomey.
We have come to a point where we're not sure if we are able to fulfill our mandate and provide assistance to people in need in Gaza. This is unprecedented.
It's too early to know exactly how the war in Gaza ends. The next big question is who governs the territory next, and the answer may lie here in the West Bank. We're told post-war plans are already being drawn up with the West Bank's Palestinian Authority.
Can I just confirm that you are in conversations with the United States about the future of Gaza?
Yes.
That's confirmed?
Yes. They are discussion. They have idea.
Okay.
And we have idea.
But those ideas may not be the same. According to Minister of Social Affairs Ahmed Majdalani, their plan would include an element of Hamas as a junior partner, despite Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's insistence Hamas must be completely destroyed.
Maybe Israel, they can destroy his military forces
and
capability, but they cannot destroy Hamas as organization.
an organization accused of mass murder and still holding more than 130 hostages. And families are still no closer to knowing their fate as the season of Hanukkah began. Instead of joy, nightly vigils like this one in Tel Aviv. There's not much to celebrate until their loved ones come home. With our colleagues inside Gaza reporting heavy fighting overnight, the UN says it's impossible to get aid into southern Gaza. But Margaret, an Israeli military official we spoke to, insisted there is a safe corridor leading from the Rafah crossing to so-called safe zones, but the UN just isn't using it.
Charlie D'Agata, thank you. We turn now to independent Senator Bernie Sanders, who joins us this morning from Burlington, Vermont.
And like I said, I will have a clip of Bernie Sanders, my last news clip before the 3 bonus kitten clips. And every now and then a kitten is walking in here, although I don't think I might have a chance to pick up a live kitten, but we'll see. I can't promise that, but I will have 3 bonus kitten clips after that Bernie Sanders clip, which is when I'll talk about the progressive position on the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and I think Bernie Sanders actually gets it pretty much right. Just like I said last week, I didn't have much of a problem with what Pramila Jayapal, the member of the House of Representatives, who chair of the House Progressive Caucus, she got a lot of blowback for not condemning the rape of Israeli women without also talking about the harm done to Palestinians. And I mean, I don't know why that's a thing, but I talked about that last week. I don't want to go into that again, but I'm just saying I will have that Bernie Sanders clip, and that's when I'll talk again a little bit more about the limits the United States might be able to place on Israel's war in Gaza and the collateral damage, killing of civilians, and whether that includes a ceasefire, which a lot of people on the left are calling for, and that's kind of an issue that Bernie Sanders addresses in that final newsmaker clip I'll show you. But before I get to the newsmaker clips, I do still have 2 more news summaries. We're going from longest to shortest, so they're getting shorter. And the next one is NBC News Meet the Press. Kristen Welker, you'll see here, does talk about the Israeli war in Gaza, also about how that's intensifying, but there's also no deal in Congress on Israel, aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine, and there is this whole issue about border policy that's holding it up, and I will talk about the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, and you'll see this one, there are no reporters. ABC actually had Martha Raddatz as a reporter in Pennsylvania for their weird take on the news this week, where random Pennsylvania voters were important to explain the Republican primary to us, but I already criticized that. And then Fox News had 2 different reporters, one of whom was in Israel, and then CBS had Charlie D'Agata in Tel Aviv, but also reporting much more strongly on what was going on in Gaza and the harm to Palestinians than anything you saw from Trey Yingst in Sderot. Now we have NBC News Meet the Press, Kristen Welker, no reporter, just sort of summarizing the news herself over in this clip.
Good Sunday morning. In many ways, this week has felt like an inflection point, with Israel's war against Hamas intensifying and claiming more lives. And tensions boiling over here at home about how to address hate speech. Adding to the mix, with less than a week to go before lawmakers leave Washington, there is still no deal on Israel and Ukraine aid. NBC News has learned that the White House is expecting to ramp up its outreach to Capitol Hill this week. But a senior administration official is making it clear the engagement will depend on having a clear framework on border negotiations to work from. And that hasn't happened yet. Earlier this week, President Biden signaled he is ready to make a deal.
I am willing to make significant compromises on the border. We need to fix the broken border system. It is broken.
In a new Wall Street Journal poll, just 27% approve of the president's handling of securing the border, 64% disapprove. NBC News has also learned a number of Hispanic and Latino members of Congress, as well as advocacy groups, are becoming increasingly concerned that President Biden may strike a deal with Republicans on immigration that they find unacceptable in order to secure passage of his Ukraine and Israel package. The fear, according to one Capitol Hill Democrat, the president will accept border policy changes proposed by Republicans that are, quote, unimaginably cruel. Now, looming over all of it, the 2024 race for the White House and new controversial comments by former President Donald Trump. In a Fox News interview this week, he was pressed several times to say categorically that he would not abuse his presidential power if elected to a second term. Mr. Trump declined to give a denial.
You are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
for?
he's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border, and I want to drill.
That's not retribution.
I'm going to be, you know, he keeps, we love this guy. He says, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Mitt Romney of
And I will have a clip of that Mitt Romney interview where he says something kind of funny about Trump's claim that he's going to be a dictator. And you saw the NBC News Meet the Press News summary there did have some of what I showed you in my first three clips, but it also kind of exemplifies what I was talking about, how they just showed that one little clip at the end there. They didn't show like the whole setup. And, you know, how Sean Hannity had, like, set up this whole left-wing argument he was going to destroy, that Trump wants to be a dictator, and how he asked him the question. And he actually, the first time he didn't say no at all. And then the second time he said no, except for day one. And then that's when he mentioned drill, baby, drill, or whatever, and close the border. And but that's not what he said in the first answer. More like, oh, like they're doing to me. Is his immediate first answer was, oh, you mean like they're doing to me, which makes me think that everything he says that he thinks he claims that he's being prosecuted by the Biden administration, which is pretty far from the truth, given the special counsel and the whole like independence of the Justice Department under the Biden administration, much more so than under the Trump administration, and certainly much more so than under the second Trump administration, should he be reelected. That's one of the many things that you can see in that the latest edition of The Atlantic. I put a link over in the live comments to the dozens of articles, including here I just put it in the live comments again if you want to see the many ways that Trump will be a dictator, including not only being totally in control of the Justice Department in a political way, but even the FCC to go after networks. He wants to go after networks that criticize him and shut down like MSNBC. He specifically said that that's one of the many ways that Trump wants to be a dictator if the American people are so foolish as to reelect him, which actually I think is not likely to happen. I mean, there's so many different things that could happen between now and the election, and I think he probably won't get reelected, but we'll see. We'll have to see how that goes. And anyway, that was the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which, not having a reporter, was pretty good, but I think that there was a lack of context for the Trump dictator clip they showed. And then the final news summary, the shortest one, just a little over 90 seconds, is CNN's State of the Union with Jake Tapper, who, of course, always starts the program letting us know what is the State of the Union this week, which I always appreciate, because, how else would we know? And then this clip, I think, also gets the Billy Joel We Didn't Start the Fire Award for the week, because he pretty much mentions all the topics you see in all the longer news summaries, but in the shortest news summary. So it's like mentioning the most topics in the least amount of time. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is preparing for what looks to be a quite ugly 2024. We're closing in on a presidential election year, and America already feels irreparably divided. Late last night, we saw former President Donald Trump leaning into his new argument that despite his and his allies' efforts to overturn the 2020 election, it is he who will save democracy, days after he told Hannity that if reelected, he would be a dictator on day one, though just on day one, a line many of his fellow Republican officials laughed off. Democrats, of course, face their own divisions. The president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned yesterday after ham-handed comments at a hearing on anti-Semitism in which she said any calls to commit genocide against Jews on campus would only violate campus harassment policy, depending on the context. And with Congress stalled over foreign aid to Ukraine and Israel, the pressure on the Biden administration over its Israel policy is only growing this weekend after the U.S. vetoed a UN Security Council ceasefire resolution that was backed by allies, and the State Department said it would bypass Congress to send Israel more ammunition for tanks as Israel pursues its offensive against Hamas in Gaza, an offensive which has killed thousands of innocent Palestinians. Hamas hides among the civilian population, of course, but the U.S. continues to say it wants Israel to do more to stop the bloodshed of innocents. Aid officials are now warning that the scale of the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza is only growing. And the president's support for Israel is continuing to divide the Democratic Party. Joining me now is Secretary of State Antony Blinken.
I don't have an Antony Blinken clip, but I thought that was a pretty good news summary from Jake Tapper there. I think he said humanitarian instead of humanitarian. He pronounced it like the early Ferengi on Star Trek Next Generation. Human, or whatever, I don't know, but that's a very minor glitch there from Jake Tapper. Otherwise, I think he fit, like I said, all the topics in all together in the shortest amount of time, 93 seconds, and he gave us the world, I guess. But anyway, the next 5 clips, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are the newsmaker clips that I'm picking out from the big 5 corporate outlets on my main topic. But the problem is that they don't all really talk about my main topic. You saw Jake Tapper talked about it, the Dictator clip right in his 93-second news summary, and I will have him talking to Al Gore, or he doesn't bring it up with Al Gore, but Al Gore brings it up with him. That'll be clip 12, which, by the way, I've never mentioned. Down in the video description, I put short summaries of all 13 of my clips, and then under sources, you can see the sources of all my video. So look down there if you want to know what's upcoming. The next one is ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. This is, oh, there's a kitten in the room with me. And this is their White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, talking about the Dictator clip in response to a question from Martha Raddatz in their panel discussion about bad polls for Biden. And I used this clip because actually the only 2 places in the entire program the Dictator clip came up were the clip I'm about to show you, and then in the news summary where that one woman was saying she doesn't care about him saying he wants to be a dictator, because, if someone has authority, they should be authoritative, whatever she said, to avoid saying, I want an authoritarian, is basically what she was saying. But anyway, this is the only other place the Dictator clip came up on the ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos program with Martha Raddatz and their White House correspondent Mary Bruce over here.
I want to turn back to President Biden this week, and he said in a fundraiser he wasn't sure he would be running for president if Donald Trump was not running. A little walk back on that later, what the president meant was.
Yeah, well, what the president meant was, I think, that this has always been about Donald Trump, right? He ran in 2020 to try and stop him. He is running now, the campaign says, the president says, to try and protect America's democracy from another Trump presidency. That is the point that the campaign says he was trying to underscore there, that this really is all about what is at stake in this election. And the president, has made that clear in the past. That said, this campaign knows that they can't just, make this some kind of referendum on Donald Trump, that they have to give voters something to vote for, not just against. And certainly they believe that Donald Trump's comments this week, talking about, boasting about some of the dictatorial actions he may take, that certainly underscores the president's argument here, President Biden's argument. They feel that was obviously a bit of a gift to the Biden
Donna,
campaign.
do you think he's
So yeah, there you can see the Mary Bruce comment about how the dictator on day one comment is a gift to the Biden administration, not for bad polls. I actually got the intro to that wrong. That was Martha Raddatz asking a question about Joe Biden telling fundraisers he wouldn't be running if Trump weren't running. That was the question there, but I got it mixed up with this next clip, actually, which is even worse than on ABC. I was talking about how ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos never mentioned the dictatorship comment, except for in that one part where Martha Raddatz was talking to a Pennsylvania voter who apparently liked authoritarians. And then in the clip I just showed you, well, Fox News Sunday never mentioned that whole dictatorship clip, even though it happened on Fox News. It was Sean Hannity in the previous week that where that clip came to be, but it wasn't mentioned anywhere until Gillian Turner, the guest host on Fox News Sunday, asked Juan Williams about the flashing red lights in Biden's bad poll numbers, and it was Juan Williams, the few people with some left-wing perspective on Fox News, who brought up the dictatorship comment over in this clip.
And there are other blinking red lights. Juan, let's talk polls for a minute. Spate of new polls out from the Wall Street Journal. Take a look at this. Trump still dominating the other Republican contenders in the primary. But interestingly, in a general now, take a look at this. He gets 47% compared to 43% for President Biden. DeSantis and Biden head-to-head in a general would come in tied at 45% each. And this is the most surprising to me. Nikki Haley comes out on top in a head-to-head against President Biden. She gets 51%. He comes out with 34%. What surprises you in there?
Well, it's bad for Biden. I think there's no getting away from the idea that Americans are at the moment looking at Biden and saying, we have some real problems here. If you're inside the Biden campaign, though, the message is the election's 11 months away. And this is not going to be 2024 a referendum on Joe Biden. There are billions. This is going to be an expensive spend on ads during this campaign. And what they're going to do is make it a choice election. They're going to remind voters about abortion. They're going to remind voters that Trump this week told Sean Hannity he's going to be a dictator on day one, right?
But only for the one day.
For the one day, okay. There's going to be a lot of argument about exactly what you are getting with Trump that now is not in the discussion. Right now, if you look at those polls, it says, for example, that Trump is beating Biden, but Trump is at like 37%. So if that's his base, the question is, what's his max? And a lot of Democrats are arguing it's below 50%. So if it's below 50%, then Joe Biden has a lot of room to grow.
To that point, Olivia, spoilers, piling up, potential spoilers on both sides. Trump's going to be on the stand tomorrow on Monday. That undoubtedly will have some impact on some voting block somewhere. Also, President Biden's son, Hunter Biden, is now indicted yet again for the second time. He's facing 9 different charges.
Yes, a pivot there after briefly letting Juan Williams talk about the dictatorship comment. Oh, look at this. I have a kitten. I told you I might be able to have a kitten as part of the live show. This is one of my 2 new kittens. I don't know, can you hear that purring? It's pretty loud. This guy purrs pretty loud. The other kitten is it's right at my left foot, but I can't have both kittens at the same time. I will be revealing the names of the kittens at the end of the program after all the newsmaker clips, when I show you the 3 bonus kitten clips. But this guy seems to be very happy right now. I don't know if you can hear the loud purring, but oh, I guess I can show you the other kitten because he just jumped up on my lap here. See? Look at this. 2 live kittens. Oh, that's about it for the live kitten part. But anyway, I hope you appreciated that I found the one mention of the Trump dictator comment on Fox News Sunday. And now I'm going to move to actual newsmaker clips. This next one, I think what Mitt Romney says about why Trump made that dictator comment is pretty funny. And I will talk about that a little more. Oh, I got a couple kittens here. After we watch Mitt Romney responding to a question from NBC's Kristen Welker about what he thinks about Trump being dictator on day one and what he thinks the Trump presidency would be like over in this clip.
Let's turn to those comments that we just played by former President Donald Trump. As you heard, he said he would not be a dictator except for day one. At an event in New York last night, he tried to downplay that. But what was your reaction to hearing those words, Senator? Do you believe him?
You know, when I was a kid, there was something called a gumball machine. You could put a penny in and a gumball would come out. It was automatic. There was no filter. Put in the penny, out came the gumball. Donald Trump is kind of a human gumball machine, which is a thought or a notion comes in and it comes out of his mouth. There's not a lot of filter that goes on. There's not a lot of what's the implication. No, he just says whatever. I don't attach an enormous amount of impact to the particular words that come out and try and evaluate each one of them. I do think you can look at his record as president, and particularly in the last months of his presidency, and say, this is a dangerous approach, it's an authoritarian approach. That gives me far more concern than him playing to the crowd as he did.
Well, given that you're saying he gives these unfiltered responses, we have actually seen him do what he says he's going to do. When he said that he believed the election was going to be rigged before people actually went to the polls, he went on to question the results, tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Why don't you take him exactly at his word?
Oh, I think we agree that we have looked at his behavior, and his behavior suggests that this is a person who will impose his will, if he can, on the judicial system, on the legislative branch, and on the entire nation. I mean, when he called people to come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, that was not a random date. That was the date when peaceful power was to occur. He called that on purpose. I mean, there's no question he has authoritarian rulings and interests and notions which he will try and impose. That's dangerous for the country. It was dangerous then. Life was lost. We were embarrassed around the world. I mean, this was a tragedy. And a number of the things he did in the last months of his presidency suggest what he'd do if he were elected again.
I want to drill down on you on just how dangerous, as you say, you perceive former President Trump to be. Liz Cheney put this into dire terms this week. She told my colleague Savannah Guthrie, quote, "There's no question Trump would refuse to leave office if he's reelected." She went so far as to say a vote for him may mean the last election that you ever get to vote in. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't think Donald Trump would want to stay in longer than 4 years. And the reason I say that is because I think he's running for retribution. And I think he will have finished his retribution after 4 years if he's elected. I don't think he particularly likes being around the White House. I think he'd rather be back at Mar-a-Lago or other properties of his. But he wants to show that he's not a loser. He won, and he wants to go after the people who were tough on him. So I think he'll be finished after 4 years and go back to other occupations.
Given everything that we have heard from former President Trump, what do you think a second Trump term would look like?
Well, I think if you can look at the last few months of his presidency, you'd suggest that that's the kind of thing you might see, that he would not have the generals around him as he did last time, people of judgment and experience offering advice, and in some cases restraining his impulses. Instead, he would have people around him encouraging his impulses and perhaps adding to them. And I'm afraid you'd find the nation more divided. Look, our nation doesn't need to be divided right now. A campaign based on anger and hate may win at the ballot box temporarily, but it tears the country apart. The other day, the former president said that we are at greater threat for what is within. I think that was in some respects a self-own, because what's within, if he were to become elected president again, is a campaign of retribution and anger and hate. That's not what America is based on. America was based on the idea of in God we trust and united we stand. Divided we fall. Divided nation is not the nation America is intended to be.
All right, well, let's move on to Hunter Biden and the headlines around that. As you know, he was...
And there you can see Kristen Welker is being fair and balanced while asking Mitt Romney about Trump's dictator comment, but also asking him about Hunter Biden. I thought, this is the other kitten. I'm going to let him down here because he wants to get down. But now I've had both kittens. Well, for a second there, I had both at the same time. But you saw Mitt Romney there I thought it was kind of funny the first time I heard it. But then the more I think about it, the less sense it makes. His whole gumball metaphor. Like when he was a kid, you put a penny in a gumball machine, and a gumball would come out. I'm pretty old, but I don't remember it being a penny. But beyond the whole penny part, so you put a penny in and a gumball comes out. Donald Trump, a thought comes in his head and there's no filter and it comes out like gumball machine should have a filter, or where's the penny where the thought coming into his head is the penny and then it's coming out, but it's the same thing. The more I think about that metaphor, the less sense it makes. But it sounded kind of funny the first time I heard it. And I want to compare and contrast that with what Al Gore said, talking to Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union. Here you can see him asking, or he spent a bunch of time talking about climate change, and then Jake Tapper asked him about what a second Trump term would mean to the world in terms of climate change and also in terms of our democracy. And you saw Jake Tapper brought up the dictatorship comment in his 93-second news summary at the beginning of the program. He doesn't ask Al Gore about it, but Al Gore brings it up. And I will talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
It does look like the 2024 election will come down to President Biden versus former President Trump. And I'm wondering what you think the world would look like under President Trump being reelected, which is certainly a possibility, not only when it comes to the climate, but also when it comes to democracy.
Well, I saw the other day where he pledged to be a dictator on day one, and you kind of wonder what it'll take for people to believe him when he tells us who he is. And, you know, the solution to political despair is political action. And for those in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party and independents who love American democracy and who want to preserve our capacity to govern ourselves and solve our problems, now's the time to get active. You know, there's a mental health crisis around the world, Jake, that we hear people talking about. I think that one of the main reasons for that is that young people look at the fact that we are not yet solving the climate crisis or dealing with some of these other challenges. And we hear this word thrown around, polycrisis. Well, solving the climate crisis is a poly solution. We know what to do. We have the means to do it. And we have to make sure that we make the right political choices in our democracy to enable ourselves to make the right choices.
So yeah, that is the Al Gore take on Trump's threat to democracy, and I wish that Jake Tapper had more specifically asked Al Gore what he thinks about someone who refused to accept the peaceful transfer of power after an election that he clearly lost, when Al Gore was much more had much more justification to behave the way Donald Trump did, but did not in the 2000 election. But that's ground he's covered before, I guess, and I'm got like silly kittens everywhere here. But before I get to the silly kitten clips, I am going to show you the final newsmaker clip I promised back on the ongoing topic week after week, the Israeli war on Hamas in Gaza, and it's creating something of a split in the Democratic Party, but not really as much as you hear about on Fox News, I think. And I promised you Bernie Sanders giving you a progressive take on whether Israel is getting enough criticism from the Biden administration for the number of civilian casualties they're inflicting, which is the question that Margaret Brennan asked Bernie Sanders at the beginning here. And then there's a follow-up about whether Bernie Sanders is with some other progressive leaders in wanting to call for a ceasefire, and he actually opposes it. And I think this is a really well-nuanced position on Bernie Sanders' part. He's really opposed the infliction of civilian casualties, but he also recognizes the nature of Hamas, which is distinct from the Palestinian people, of course, but he makes that distinction, and I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that final newsmaker clip together over here.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that he sees a gap between Israel's stated intent of limiting civilian casualties and reality. And the Secretary of Defense said they could face a strategic defeat given civilian casualties. Is this vocal enough criticism from the administration in your point of view?
Well, it's a start. I think both Blinken and Austin are right. What the president is trying to do is trying to make clear to Netanyahu and his right-wing extremist government is, yes, you can go to war against Hamas, but you cannot go to war against the Palestinian people and cause the horrific damage to human life that we are seeing right now. Margaret, there have been 16,000 people killed so far, Palestinians, 2/3 of whom are women and children. You're talking about 1.9 million people displaced, going around without any water, food, without any medical supplies. It is a humanitarian disaster, and the United States has got to put all of the pressure that it can to tell Netanyahu to stop this disastrous military approach.
And just to be clear, Israel says it's killed 7,000 militants. They haven't explained how many civilians they estimate they've killed. The U.S. says they can't tally it. The number you cited there is from the Gaza Ministry of Health. But the bottom line here is I know you have been very clear to your colleagues the U.S. should not provide more aid to Israel, to the Netanyahu government, with no strings attached, you wrote, because it would make the U.S. complicit. You said, quote, in an all-out war against innocent men, women, and children who have nothing to do with Hamas. What do you believe the Netanyahu government's intent is here?
Hard to say. It really is hard to say. It may be that they're responding in rage against the horrific and terrible Hamas attack that killed 1,200 innocent Israelis. Maybe in some of the right-wing extremist minds, there is the goal to drive the Palestinian people off of Gaza completely. They have now destroyed about half of the housing units in Gaza, so it's hard to predict. But I think when General Austin said you can win the battle but lose the war, Israel is losing the war in terms of how the world is looking at this situation. And I think that it would be irresponsible for the United States to give Netanyahu another $10 billion to continue to wage this awful war.
So progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib have been clear in calling for a ceasefire. You've taken some flack because you have not. The United States government is opposing a ceasefire as well, and they're isolated at the UN on that point. Why is it you oppose a ceasefire?
Well, first of all, I strongly support and wish and hope that the United States will support the United Nations resolution that was vetoed, that we vetoed the other day. That was a humanitarian pause, a humanitarian ceasefire that would have, by the way, called for the release of all of the hostages held by Hamas and would have allowed the UN and other agencies to begin to supply the enormous amount of humanitarian aid that the Palestinian people have. A permanent ceasefire. I don't know how you can have a permanent ceasefire with Hamas, who has said before October 7th and after October 7th that they want to destroy Israel. They want a permanent war. I don't know how you have a permanent ceasefire with an attitude like that.
Okay, so the war you're saying against Hamas is justified in that way.
I think Israel has the right to defend itself and to go after Hamas, not the Palestinian people.
Okay.
So yeah, I think I said before I showed the clip that Bernie Sanders differentiated between Hamas and the Palestinian people, and that's just how the clip ended. They were having audio problems. That wasn't anything having to do with my production. That was CBS News Face the Nation, and Bernie Sanders had some problems there that I think you were experiencing. But I think that is like the best and most nuanced position, or that is the best and most nuanced position in terms of being close to how I feel about the Israeli attack or the Israeli, excuse me, war in Gaza and the ongoing attacks on Hamas in that war, and what's justified and what isn't justified, and going after Hamas and getting rid of its capability to do attacks like the October 7th attack in Israel, to make sure that that's the right of self-defense right there, to make sure for Israel's right to make sure that that doesn't happen to Israel again, with over 1,000 Israelis killed and hundreds of hostages, and the whole horrific rape and sexual assault thing that we saw also. But I mean, that's all self-defense, but killing 17,000 Palestinians, maybe 6,000 or 7,000 of whom were Hamas fighters, that's kind of what you can glean from the news summaries you saw there. That still leaves like 10,000 civilians, and about half of the people in Gaza are children, and that's a lot of dead civilians, even if they weren't the targets. That's like too much collateral damage, and Bernie Sanders made that point as well. So I think that was a pretty nuanced position. And before I finish talking about this topic, I also want to answer. I got a question like, at 6:40, that was like 37 minutes ago. I apologize, Tom Trask. You posted this super chat question so long ago, and I'm finally getting to it. I appreciate the super chat contribution because I don't make a lot of YouTube revenue from these live streams. Most of my revenue comes from super chat contributions, my YouTube members, and of course, right under the video and the video description, the first two links are to my monthly supporters on Patreon, who I really appreciate, and then you can also give one-time contributions through PayPal if you like what I'm doing. But Tom Trask's question is, do you know why Palestine has never been recognized as a country with the same level of recognition as Israel? This seems key to many problems. Well, actually I do. Palestine was first a recognized area or was a recognized, I don't know first, but was a recognized area after World War One, according to this secret agreement between France and England that they would control the Middle East. The Sykes-Picot Accord gave the Palestinian mandate to under the League of Nations to England, Britain, the UK, and from World War One till through World War Two, uh, Britain was in control of that area. Then after World War II, there was this UN partition plan where it was supposed to be split up between the Jews and the Palestinians, and the Jews accepted the plan, but the Palestinians and the surrounding Arab states did not accept the UN partition plan, and that's the Israeli War of Independence, where they consolidated their areas, and that's what the Palestinians call the Nakba, where many Palestinians were expelled from areas where Israel was given control, and there's like two different histories on what happened then, but that was why there is an Israel but not a Palestinian state, because the Arabs/Palestinians rejected the 1947 partition plan from the UN. Israel, or the Jews, accepted it, and they consolidated their position in Israel. There have been many different plans to create a Palestinian state. There was the under the Carter administration, there was the accord between Israel and Egypt that was supposed to create a Palestinian state. Eventually didn't work. There was the whole Oslo Accords during the Clinton administration, where they offered Yasser Arafat pretty much all of the West Bank and Gaza, with like a few percent missing and some things. But I talked about this a few weeks ago, and Yasser Arafat rejected that deal from like left-wing Israeli Prime Minister Barak, but there's also been a lot of wrongdoing on the Israeli side, and Benjamin Netanyahu and the Likud party and the settlers in the West Bank, and have also contributed to the lack of a two-state solution and a Palestinian state. But anyway, that is the sort of like too long, short answer to your question, Tom Trask, but I appreciate the question. And anyway, now I'm done with my newsmaker clips and my news topics. You've kind of seen, I have like two kittens right here to my right that I've already picked up that I'm not going to pick up again, but I'm going to tell you a little story with the 3 bonus pet kitten clips. These are two about 3-month-old kittens that we adopted from a local shelter on Saturday. 2 male kittens that they came in the shelter named Cheech and Chong. Those are the names of the kittens. Cheech, they're both supposedly gray tabbies, although especially Chong looks a little more like a brown tabby than a gray tabby, I think. Cheech is a medium hair, and Chong is a short hair. They're siblings, so they look a lot alike, but I'm telling you how to tell them apart, because Cheech is a little fluffier and a little darker, and I'm going to show you 3 clips. First, here is the first time we opened the box when we got them home on Saturday over here. So that's my unboxing video. And then I was just going to show you them eating together so you get an idea what they look like, although I guess you kind of saw what they look like during the show, so this is kind of superfluous, but here's an eating clip, Cheech and Chong together. So you can kind of see Cheech there on the left with a little bit longer hair and darker and eating, and then Chong on the right with the drinking. And then this is the my favorite of the three Kitten clips, and I'm going to be showing you a lot of Kitten clips, hopefully over the next year as I finish up my weekly live stream. But in this clip, Chong has jumped into a laundry basket, and they spend a lot of time doing this play fighting, like hours a day. And it's not like one bullying the other, because like half the time Cheech is attacking Chong and Chong's running away, and then the other half Chong is attacking Cheech and Cheech is running away. So I think it's okay. But anyway, here you can see Chong jumped into a laundry basket and Cheech is attacking through the laundry basket. I thought this was pretty cute for the final clip of the show over here. And there you go, the bonus Kitten clips, 3 bonus Kitten clips, and some live Kitten interaction. They're actually, Cheech is right here, and Chong is right over there in the corner, and I'm gonna try to get them out of here right after the show, and maybe have some kitten time. So I hope you enjoyed the time and effort I put into picking out the clips and adding my media criticism and political commentary. I will be back next Monday and every Monday all the way through January 2025 till we find out if there's going to be a second Biden administration or peaceful transfer of power to our dictator on day one, or who knows. There's so many different ways it could end, and we'll all find out in January 2025, I guess. And until next Monday, or until I have some other reason to upload a video, I guess I will be seeing all of you around